As Anshul said, I'm Mary Jacob in Aberystwyth University, and this is a talk about developing resilience in an ever-changing AI landscape. And so this is a let's see, there we go. So this is an image that I created using AI, and I did multiple iterations of putting in prompts and choosing and tweaking. And I chose this one because I could relate to somebody standing on one of those little floating things that looks like a tree, but it's not very well rooted in the ground. And so we have nature, but we have something very high tech and seems like ever changing, constantly changing. And I think that based on what I've seen, I think that people are feeling similar to that. So we've already done this little poll. And now I'd like to say a little bit about what we need in this landscape. I think we saw that diversity in your answers, and maybe one person might feel opposite feelings. That's perfectly fine. So in this constantly changing landscape, what I would argue is we need both individual and institutional resilience. And these are two dimensions of the same thing, but with different actions maybe. Because we need to adapt rapidly and we need to make considered decisions. As you all know, Turnitin in the middle of last semester suddenly launched an AI detector, and institutions had to decide within 48 hours in the UK, are we enabling this or are we not enabling this? This is very difficult because it's not as if there's a ready-made answer out there. So we have to adapt really on a very short notice. We need to develop AI literacy, both for educators and for students. Educators need it so we can teach it to our students, but also so that we can use it effectively ourselves. And students need it for that future world of work on the horizon for them. But in our learning and teaching context, there are risks and there are benefits. So we need to manage those risks without losing the benefits, so it's finding that middle ground. And that requires that we think critically about our choices, about what the output from these tools, about the different tools, the impact on their students, everything. So in a higher education context, we want our students to learn effectively and ethically, and this is a whole new thing. I was just reading an article by Phil Dawson I highly recommend to you, how it's not the same as when calculators were introduced, we all had to adapt to that. If you're doing anything that was maths related, this is actually not just different in scale, but different in type. So we have these new challenges. So I think that resilience is necessary, especially now. Based on what you said, I think I could imagine that many of you might be able to relate to this image of tangle wires, all different colors. How can you untangle this complicated knot? There are no easy answers. We have those big changes on short notice, and as I'm sure you all know, it's being embedded everywhere. It's being incorporated into, throughout tools like Microsoft Office. It's already embedded in Blackboard. It appears in all kinds of tools, including the VVOX poll that I just gave you, and new things every day. So we have to adapt to it. We don't have a choice to say, oh, we'll just not deal with it. And then because part of it has to do with these big corporations, as individuals, we have very little control. Blackboard says we've got this tool. We could decide whether to turn it on or not. We have to evaluate it. But things like Microsoft tools or Google, whatever, other, Meta, obviously, we can't control what the corporations are doing, so we have to adapt. These are high stakes issues for institutions and individuals involved in higher education, and therefore we have high emotions on all sides. And I don't know how many of you can relate to this, but I imagine that pretty much everybody has seen in one way or another someone panicked. Maybe we get panicked, or someone comes to us asking for help and they're panicked. Or somebody comes in and says, this is a solution to everything. It's like, hold on, let's think critically first. So on both sides, any side of these issues, the emotions are really high because there is so much at stake. So I want to take a step back and define this term, and then we'll look at applying it to institutional context and individual context. So the American Psychological Association defines it this way. Resilience is the process and outcome of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life experiences, especially through mental, emotional, and behavioral flexibility and adjustment to external and internal demands. Now, that's talking about psychological resilience, what goes on in our own minds. But I think it also applies to the higher education context as a whole and institutional context. So for the AI context, what I think resilience looks like is that flexibility and adaptability. The critical thinking is crucial. That's not part of the psychological resilience, but it is part of resilience in our context in higher education. That agile response, so being able to make a decision quickly and to come up with a policy on short notice that is going to be rational and well-grounded, is a challenge. And that's a little bit more, goes beyond that individual resilience idea. So that is what universities have to do. But for ourselves as individuals, we also have this emotional regulation and finding the best ways to support ourselves and others. And I think that is both the psychological and operational resilience. So on the institutional level, I'm going to use Aberystwyth University as a little micro case study, but I'm not going to give you all the details, give you a little glimpse though. So I think one of the things we need as for institutions is to avoid those extremes between panic and uncritical enthusiasm. So if we see a senior manager or a decision maker or a stakeholder or, students, staff, whatever, at those extremes, how can we calm down and bring into the middle? It's not an easy place to be because there aren't those easy answers, but it's a better place to be. And as an institution, it's where I think we have to be. So in order to find that middle ground, we need to coordinate efforts across the university. And I will show you how we did this here at Aberystwyth. And by talking about coordinating efforts, I'm including students and staff in all different kinds of roles. So it's really important that we listen to students. And then the people who are making the decisions for the university, we need to identify priorities because there's too much to do in a short period of time. What's the most important thing to do now? Do that first. So the immediate goal, the short term, the middle term, long term goals. Whoops. And then once we've identified the priorities, we need to be able to work rapidly to meet the first one and then go on to the next one and the next one, and sometimes adapt to something new that suddenly emerges. One of the ways that we can be resilient as an institution is to find ways to use existing materials, adapt them, share materials with others. And this is where I really want to give a big thank you to a lot of people, some of whom are in the session today, who have a strong ethos of sharing and materials and amplifying good practice. So we don't have to build everything from scratch ourselves and keep it behind a wall. And then finally, communicate through multiple channels. And I'm going to give you a little micro example now for that, using and adapting and sharing materials. This came up just in the last 2 days. So I'm the coordinator for our generative AI working group. And we've been encouraging departments to have a discussion and decide what guidance you want to give for your department specific context. What kind of guidance do you want to give to your students? So now they've done this, and we're starting to collect these examples of wording for guidance for students from the different departments, put them into a sharing folder in SharePoint, contacted all our directors of learning and teaching and said, this is what we have, you're welcome to use it. Do you have any examples from your own department you would like to share? Boom. This is my high point of the day yesterday, when I saw that people were not only sharing, adapting, and then resharing and crediting, I got this idea from that department. And so we're really bringing that forward in a very agile and rapid way. So that's the kind of thing that we have to do. And sometimes it works really well like that. Sometimes it doesn't always work. So then we try different ways until we can find the right response. It's not going to be perfect, but we can make that forward progress. So here's what our group is. We have a generative AI working group. We report to the Academic Enhancement Committee, and I seem to have proposed this in January, so we set the group up in February. And here are the people who are on it. We've got our registry unacceptable academic practice staff, academic integrity officer, representatives from each faculty, including one of whom is familiar and is from computer science department and works with AI. Our student union education officer, our academic engagement team are the librarians in our university. Big props to librarians. And the LTEU is the team I'm part of, Learning and Teaching Enhancement Unit. We've got student support staff and myself as the coordinator. So what we do is we draw on the expertise from the sector, wonderful things out there, such as QAA, National Center for AI and Tertiary Education, so on. And we create guidance, we suggest policy wording, and we devise support and training for staff and students. So here's what we've done since February. We've made staff-facing training and guidance, student-facing videos. My colleagues in the academic engagement team created a LibGuide, library guide, about using AI in the library. They gave us a web page in there for the working group to use. So that's all of our student-facing guidance and information comes from at the institution level is all findable in that one location. So anything new will get linked in there. So students don't have to know a whole bunch of different places to go. We run monthly sessions that are training sessions for staff and discussion forums for staff together with students to share experiences, discuss rather than just be told things, make suggestions for the working group. Unacceptable academic practice. I'm sure that most of you have done something similar here. Presenting work generated by AI as if it were your own is now part of our policy. That was rolled out in March. I think was really pleased to have that happen in a very resilient and flexible, agile way. And our guidance for staff was also rolled out beginning of March. I think we did really well to do that in a month. So that's the training and support. I'll give you a glimpse at a few slides from the training for staff and students. I'm not going to read these out. I think most of you probably know this about AI already. My key point on this one is students might bypass the learning process if they use it in a way. Obviously, academic integrity issues and some caveats here, what we can do, what we can't do. And then in terms of how we support students, this is the guidance we put into the training. Be transparent with our students. Why are we asking students to do these assessments? Make the expectations clear, encourage students to think critically, and so on. Read authoritative texts. I think it's easy to overlook that part about actually reading books written by people rather than just finding a citation and popping it in. And for staff, I would really encourage people to consider a classroom activity where you lead your students through that process of using generative AI critically, ethically, and effectively. So this is our advice for staff. And here's what it looks like for students. So this is the LibGuide. This shows the page with our 3 videos that created by the working group. And here are a couple of slides from the videos for students, putting learning first. So this is these are basically the student side of the same guidance we give for staff. So it's coordinated. I'm not going to read these out to you. I will be giving you links where you can see these videos if you want. So synthesizing what you learn from multiple sources, I think, is really key. So as you can see, this is intended to be presented in a way that's accessible and friendly for students. So that's what we've been doing on the institutional level, but I think on the individual level as well, we really need that resilience. So that means taking care of ourselves and others, and that's recognizing that human element with us. So I'm just going to say a quick word about the amygdala hijack. I don't know, some of you are probably familiar with this already. The amygdala is a certain, they're mirrored in your brain. It's a structure in the limbic system that responds when you feel that you're in a situation of fight or flight. You feel a threat coming in, so the amygdala fires and hormones go throughout your body so that you can climb up that tree or escape from the tiger. But at the same time, it dampens down the executive processing in the frontal cortex. So you're not thinking rationally, you're not really going through that deep evaluative thinking. You're trying to escape from the tiger. But when people come to us like in that state, or when we start to feel that state rising in us, we need to bring it down. So if we notice it in ourselves, we can recognize those signs and bring it down. And if we notice it in others, then we can stop ourselves from responding. And like, if somebody comes to me, they're in a panic, I'm in a panic, and then we start to ratchet up. That's not helpful. Part of it is like a deep breath and taking note of your body, letting it relax, bringing in that kindness and compassion, acknowledging difference between individuals. You know, everybody won't respond in the same way. Some people will be really excited and happy. Some people will be terrified. That's fine. There's no wrong response. And recognizing that we need this tolerance for uncertainty and imperfection, both in ourselves and in others, but also in that landscape. There's so much that we're not in a stable situation at the moment with AI. Who knows what's going to happen a year from now in terms of sustainability? So let that panic drain out and be kind to each other. And I would highly recommend, if any of you do any kind of mindfulness related practice like yoga, meditation, going for long walks, whatever it might be, it doesn't have to be formally mindfulness, that thing that allows you to bring it down. If you bring it down in yourself, that helps other people that you're talking with bring down that sense of panic. And that can be really helpful for us to be resilient. So that's the psychological resilience. So now I'm going to say just a few words about AI literacy, and then we'll be on for the next speaker. So we need this so we can teach our students. But what is it? It's constantly changing. There isn't any easy answer out there. So this is our next item on our agenda for our working group. And here's the sort of initial thinking about AI literacy. One is about choices. We need to make informed choices where we can know the strengths and weaknesses of the things we're using, where we can factor in data protection and not do something that is putting personal data at risk by putting it into a chatbot, for example. We need to recognize that the platform might not be reliable and the data might not be reliable. And a really important thing, and I was happy to see Dustin, I'm going to call you out, not call you out on this. I want to give you a shout out for the contribution you've made on this, Dustin Hosseini, in pointing out some of the issues about equity. This is a massive topic which we don't have time to explore fully here, but we need to be aware that these tools do not necessarily generate equal and fair output. And also students who can afford to pay for the paid for tools can have a better tool. Students who can't afford that will be disadvantaged. So there are equity issues among students as well as reflected in the data. So the second one is to critique. So we need to critique that output. Is it factually true? We need to check it, which we might not do that much checking if we're reading a book, but we need to critique the output here. Is it biased? Is it incomplete? Is it overly generic? Both for us as staff and for us as students. I'm including everybody in both categories, to be honest with you. And the third part, I think, is something to think about for AI literacy has to do with use, using it ethically and effectively. And so part of that, as I'm sure people in this group today have already given a lot of thought to academic integrity issues. You know, what's acceptable, what's not? Is it cheating? Is it not cheating? And that transparency as staff to our students and students back to our staff. But also, I think this issue of sustainability. And to be perfectly honest with you guys, I am very concerned about the overall sustainability of this as an industry, because of the massive amount of electricity and resources that are required and the huge carbon footprint of these data processing centers. I'm not sure what's going to happen with this in the really long term, but I don't have control over it. But I think we need to have this in the back of our minds that, okay, there could be another huge change coming up that will happen as a result of this. If this is a bubble, I think it will not pop, but I think it will collapse to a certain extent. I think we will probably, my feeling from reading hundreds of articles on this now is that we're going to see a condensation of this. But we really don't know. So we have to be mindful and soothe the amygdala so we can not be subject to that amygdala hijack, but be aware of that. And then also at a very basic level, both as students and staff, does it save time or not? You know, is it really helping us or not? I think they've built this whole technology. It's not just one tool, it's a whole range of tools that may or may not be addressing a real problem that we have. You know, it might not be doing what people need a tool to do. They might be doing something we didn't need. So we need to think about that. Is it helping? If it is, great. Use it critically. If is it not helping, then use a better tool that will help. So these are my key messages here. There's no easy answers. We need to keep it simple and prioritize. Be kind to ourselves and others, and as much as possible, use what's already out there. And so this is your gift today. I pulled together a list of resources. Some of these are quite recent, and these are not all of them, but some of the best ones that I've seen recently. And Anshul will be making this available to you all, so you can click on these links and go to these wonderful sites. So you can see who we are looking at. I'm not going to read through these, but I really hope that you will find those. And that's my contact information.